right. So welcome. This will be the pre-arrival webinar focusing on first steps for our international graduate students. But first off, on behalf of the International Services and Engagement Office, as well as the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs, congratulations on your admittance to UC San Diego and such a warm welcome. We are so excited to have our incoming cohort of students already getting to meet you, to interact with you, and support you throughout your time here. My name is Grace Fuller. I get to serve as the Manager of International Experience and Engagement here at the International Services and Engagement Office, and I'll hand it over to my colleague, Jessica, to go ahead and introduce herself.
Thank you, Grace. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good evening from wherever you're joining in the world. We're so excited, as Grace said, to have you joining us, and thanks for taking the time. My name is Jessica Boyle. I am an international student advisor here at the International Services and Engagement Office, and I will pass it on to my colleague, Mary, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Hogan, and I am the Director of Graduate Admissions in the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs. And I'm so glad to be here to answer any questions you may have around admissions or any of the processes that take place right after being admitted. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Shauna.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Shauna Slaviota. I use pronouns she and hers. I am a student services advisor in graduate education and postdoctoral affairs. And part of my work is doing orientation and welcome events for new graduate students at UC San Diego. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. This is a snapshot of how we'll spend our time together today. So we'll do a brief overview of the International Services and Engagement Office. Then we have some graduate admissions reminders for you all. Jessica will kind of talk through applying for your I-20 and your DS 2019 and subsequent visa. Our iPortal does open on Monday, March 18th, and so I'm sure many of you are excited to kind of prepare your materials for that. We'll go through approaching deadlines and reminders, as well as any upcoming webinars and additional resources, and we will dedicate the end of each webinar to open question and answer. And with that, I want to go over that you are in listen-only mode. So you can hear us, but unfortunately, we can't hear you. So the primary way that we are going to actually interact together today is through the Q&A feature on your Zoom menu bar. So you can ask questions throughout the webinar. We do ask to allow us to get through a good majority of the content in case we do answer any of those questions. But if for some reason we aren't able to answer your question today, you can always contact our office via icontact.ucsd.edu. And finally, we are recording. So we'll record each and every one of these pre-arrival webinars, and you'll be able to view these webinar recordings at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. And what's cool about inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu is that this is a place where you can both register for upcoming webinars, and then in about a week or so after the webinar date, we will update the hyperlink with the actual webinar recording. And so we'll have previous webinars as well as upcoming webinars. And under previous webinars, you'll be able to find the webinar recording. So that's a place that you can refer to throughout this pre-arrival season to access this information. Again, just a friendly reminder, so on your Zoom control panel, this is what the Q&A feature will look like. And you can, again, ask those questions throughout our time together, and we'll have our different panelists be monitoring that. Okay, so a little bit about the International Services and Engagement Office. So we are so excited, again, to be able to support you throughout your time at UC San Diego. Our office is made up of 30 professional staff as well as 15 student staff. And we are really here to support our entire international community. So that includes our international students, our scholars, their families, with your holistic journey. So supporting you in your academic and personal goals, a successful transition to campus and student life, as well as meaningful engagement with the university and our local community. One of my favorite things that I get to talk about is our students, right? You who will be joining our cohort. So this is from fall 2023, but you can see our snapshot here. We have just under 4,000 undergraduate students and just under 4,000 graduate students as well, making up just under 8,000 international students who are currently enrolled. We also support over 2,000 international students working after graduation. So some of you may be familiar with OPT, STEM OPT, and academic training, for a total service population of around 10,000 students. You can see our places of origin. We have students coming from over 100 different countries, as well as some of our top places, as well as some of our most popular programs and fields of study. So with that, we are so excited to welcome you. This is like the beginning of our pre-arrival season, and then we look forward to welcoming you in person in September at new student orientation. And you'll see some of the photos here are from that season. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleagues in the Graduate Education and Professional Division of Graduate Education and Professional Affairs to talk about some of your first steps from your graduate admissions.
Thank you, Grace. So you all have been admitted, so congratulations again. And you are very likely familiar with your applicant status portal at this time. And so it's very important to make sure that you're logging into that portal and reviewing all of the next steps that are listed for you to complete, because you likely logged in, saw your admission decision, hopefully felt really excited, but then might have, not necessarily seen the other links available to you in the applicant status portal or other to-do items. So please be sure to fill out your statement of legal residence form if it's a to-do item listed in your portal. It isn't required by every single program, so if it's not there, there's no action that you need to take. Most students are provisionally admitted at the time when they receive their "Congratulations, you've been admitted to UC San Diego" letter. Please be sure to submit the items listed under your pending admissions documents section in your portal to finalize your admission. For most students who have, or for all students who have attended and earned degrees from institutions outside of the United States, a WES course by course evaluation is required for submission, and that is listed in your portal. All of the details around how to request and how to complete your WES evaluation is in your portal. But as always, please contact gradadmissions@ucsd.edu if you have absolutely any questions regarding your pending admissions documents or just questions in general. And I also always like to remind everyone, make sure that you respond to your offer of admission. So sometimes students, they're really excited, they see it, and they don't actually open the decision reply form and select like, yes, I accept, or no, I decline. So make sure that you do that. It's really important. Otherwise, important steps like PID creation or UCSD email address creation will be significantly delayed. So here is a snapshot of what your applicant status portal likely looks like, or very similar. Yours will look very similar at the very least. So you see here under forms, there's two little green check marks next to decision reply form and statement of legal residence. So that means that if there's a green check mark, it's been completed. If you see a red X, that means it has not been completed. And again, the statement of legal residence will not show up for absolutely everyone, but for the majority of students coming here. It's not a requirement for every single one of our graduate programs. And then over on the right-hand side, definitely make sure that your address, verify your address, make sure it's correct. And then you'll also see a section that says admitted students, and these are all links to pages on our website that you will find very important and hopefully helpful. Giving you just next steps on what you need to do immediately, what to do before arriving on campus. There's a section for international students specifically, and some other to-dos once you arrive on campus. So please make sure you check out those pages. And again, You can always email gradadmissions@ucsd.edu with any follow-up questions. And if we're not the correct office, or the best office, I should say, to field your questions, we'll make sure to connect you with those who can help.
Thanks so much, Mary. And like Mary mentioned, so in addition to some of your requirements from graduate admissions, there are some additional steps from our office. So we have tried to make this as intuitive as possible. We've created a website, inewstudent.ucsd.edu, and that should take you through some of your steps for applying for your F1 or J1 visa. So it'll take you to this first screen here on the left. And you can kind of self-select. Obviously, many of you will select the graduate student box, and then it'll kind of take you step by step for applying for your F1 or J1 status, preparing for your arrival to UC San Diego, and then finally what to do upon arrival. So that should be a helpful way to kind of orient yourself to this process. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jessica, to start talking about applying for your US visa.
Thank you, Grace. And can I ask really quickly, Grace, maybe can everyone hear me? My audio changed midway through the Zoom. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yes, so all right. So let's talk about how to get started on applying for your F1 or J1 student visa. Here at ISEO, we break the visa process down into 6 steps. And when we say the visa process, we are talking about what it takes from an immigration perspective for you to get from having accepted your offer of admission to actually feet on the ground here in San Diego. The first step in this process is to request and receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office, the International Services and Engagement Office. I want to really quickly point out that if you are currently in the United States on an F1 or as an F1 or J1 student, this step is also required of you. So if you're attending this webinar and thinking, I don't need to get an F or J visa stamp because I already have one, that may be the case, but note that you will still need to request a new Form I-20 or DS 2019 from ISEO in order to attend UC San Diego. So don't leave. The information in this webinar will still be relevant to you. If you are in need of an F1 or J1 visa stamp to enter the United States, then the next step, once you have received your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office, will be to schedule your visa interview. This will involve submitting the visa application, which is called the Form DS 160, to your local US embassy or consulate and paying the required fees associated with that application process. You'll then attend your visa interview upon the scheduled date. And upon successful completion of the visa interview and application process, the US Embassy or Consulate will provide you with your F1 or J1 visa stamp. You'll then be able to plan your travel to the United States. Now, the visa process doesn't stop there. Many students think that once they've obtained their visa stamp, they will just be able to enter the United States and that that's kind of the last step in the process. Once you have your Form I-20 or DS 2019, plus your F1 or J1 visa stamp, you actually then need to still successfully enter the United States. And this is called applying for entry at the port of entry. And it is where you will go through customs and they will review your documentation as an international student. And then last but not least, upon successfully passing through customs, you will then arrive to the United States and UC San Diego. And the last step in the visa process is to arrive to UC San Diego and complete with our office what is called CVIS check-in. And this is required in order to activate your F1 or J1 status. The check-in process is a form that you'll submit to our office showing proof that you've successfully entered the United States. Once you have submitted that CVIS check-in form, we will activate your F or J status and you will be an active status international student in the US. So today we're going to look at just the first step in this process, which is how to request and receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019. And next week, on Tuesday, March 19th at 8:30 Pacific Daylight Time, we'll be holding our next pre-arrival webinar, where we're going to discuss the next 3 steps in this visa process, which is the visa application process itself. So we'll look at, once you've gotten your Form I-20 or DS 2019, how do you actually apply for that F1 or J1 visa stamp? If you've not registered for this webinar next week, you can do that by visiting inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu, and we hope that you'll come back and join us for that session. All right, so let's take a look at step 1, how to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019. Again, I want to just pause and say, if you're listening to this webinar, you're currently in the US on an F1 or J1 visa. So maybe you're graduating from your US bachelor's or master's program. Maybe you're finishing up your optional practical training. And if you are hoping to transfer your CVIS record to UC San Diego, you are still required to request a Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office. In early May, we will be hosting another pre-arrival webinar that is going to focus specifically on the CVIS transfer process. So mark your calendars and check our inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu website to register for this pre-arrival webinar. The registration link will be hosted soon. This will be an important session for you to attend if you are currently in the US on an F or J visa, because we'll talk about how you move your F or J record from your current school to UC San Diego. All right. But let's talk about if you are in need of an F1 or J1 visa stamp. I want to briefly begin by explaining what the Form I-20 and DS 2019 are. So as we already mentioned, you must have first received your Form I-20 in order to apply for an F1 visa stamp, or you must have first received your Form DS 2019 in order to apply for a J1 visa stamp. And this is because the Form I-20 and the Form DS 2019 are the certificate of visa eligibility for the F1 and J1 visa stamps. The Form I-20 and the Form DS 2019 let the US consulate know that you have been admitted to UC San Diego and that you are seeking a US visa for the purpose of coming to the United States as an international student. So this is why you are required to first obtain this form before you can move forward with actually scheduling your visa interview. Beginning this upcoming Monday, March 18th, as Grace mentioned, you will be able to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office. And once you've received it, then you'll have the information you need to move forward with the visa application process. So let's talk about how you submit that request to us. So the International Services and Engagement Office, ISEO, our office, we use an online portal called iPortal to intake service requests. In other words, to request a service or a document from our office, you have to submit that request via the iPortal. iPortal will open this Monday, March 18th in the morning, Pacific Daylight Time. So keep that time zone in mind depending where you are in the world. iPortal will open Monday morning for you to submit your Form I-20 or DS 2019 service request. iPortal can be accessed by logging in at iportal.ucsd.edu using your UC San Diego single sign-on. It is important to note that in order to access iPortal, you must have completed your UC San Diego account setup. So as Mary mentioned, this means you need to have accepted your offer of admission so that you can set up your UC San Diego personal identification number, that's called your PID, and also your UC San Diego email address. That is the email that ends with the @ucsd.edu domain. Students gain access to iPortal 2 to 3 days after they have completed these setup items. So if you have not completed any one of those 3, if you haven't yet accepted your offer of admission, haven't set up your PID, haven't set up your UCSD email, please take the time between now and Monday to do those things so that come Monday you are able to access iPortal. In iPortal, you will need to submit a new admit service request. If you've been admitted to a program that starts in the fall quarter, you'll submit the new admit I-20 or DS 2019 service request. If you've been admitted to a program that requires you to begin during the summer, you'll submit the new admit I-20 or DS 2019 summer start program. If you're not sure when your graduate program requires you to begin, you can look at your admission letter. If you've been admitted to a summer start program, your summer start date will typically be detailed in your admission letter. If you're still having some trouble finding your start dates, you can check in with your academic department and your graduate coordinator to verify that information. Instructions for how to submit your new admit request and what documents you will be required to upload to that request form can be found on our website at inewstudent.ucsd.edu under step 1, which is applying for your FRJ status. On our website, you're going to find instructions for how to complete those UC San Diego account setup items. Also, you'll find important deadlines. So hopefully many of you, if not most of you, will be accessing iPortal on Monday and starting to submit your request. But if you need a little more time to gather your documents, make sure you take a look at the deadlines on our website under step 1. The recommended deadline by which you submit documents is based on when your graduate program is starting, summer or fall. In order to obtain your Form I-20 or DS 2019, you're also going to need to upload several supporting documents to this request. Most notably, there are specific funding requirements that you are required to prove in order to be eligible to receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 and to apply for your F1 or J1 visa stamp. So definitely check out our website and make sure you review the funding requirements page. You will be required to upload financial documents to your request in iPortal in order to show that you have the amount of funding estimated to be required for your graduate program. In addition, there will be some other documents that you'll need to upload. These will be things like a copy of your passport profile page, your UC San Diego admission letter, possibly other documents if you are transferring your CVIS record from another US school or if you're bringing dependents with you. The form will direct you to upload certain documents depending on how you fill it out in the information you report. Processing time for the Form I-20 or DS 2019 is 15 business days from when you successfully complete and submit your new admit request in iPortal. And it's very important to note that the 15 business day processing time begins when your iPortal request is both successfully completed and submitted. So in other words, if you submit your iPortal request incorrectly, for example, maybe you didn't fill out some of the information, or maybe you forgot to upload one of the required documents, or maybe the financial documents you uploaded don't meet the requirements for the F or J visa. Then when an ISEO student advisor reviews that request, they're going to set it to incomplete. You will then be required to go back into the request, fix the missing information or documents, and resubmit the request. And only once you've resubmitted it and the request is successfully complete is that 15 business day then going to kick in. So please take time to review the instructions on our website under step 1 so that you know exactly what's going to be required of you and you are ready to provide that information and upload the correct documents to your request so that when you submit it, it's complete, it's ready to go for review. This will help you receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 as quickly as possible, right? That 15-day processing time, business day processing time. When your Form I-20 or DS 2019 has been issued, it's going to be uploaded to your new admit request in iPortal. From there, you will need to download it, print it, and sign it by hand. A common question we get from students is, can I sign this electronically or digitally? Do I really have to print it? Do I have to sign it by hand? You cannot sign it digitally or electronically. Yes, you do have to print it and sign it by hand. The US government allows institutions, universities to electronically or digitally sign these forms and electronically provide them to students, but the US government does require you as the student to have a hard copy of this form that you have signed by hand. And you will be required to bring that hard copy signed by hand document to your visa interview when you go to the consulate, and also show it at customs when you are entering the United States. So locate a printer, print it, and make sure you sign it by hand. All right. So that's the first step in the visa process. Once you've received your I-20 or DS-2019, as we mentioned before, then you'll have the information you need to move forward with the visa process by scheduling an interview with your local US embassy or consulate. Again, plan to join us next Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. We'll be talking through steps 2, 3, and 4 of this process, how you actually go about scheduling that visa interview.
Thank you so much, Jessica. All right, so before we move into our question and answer, I'm just going to have a brief few slides to talk about ways you can already start to get engaged with our office and UC San Diego at large. So I want to point out our iEvents calendar. So our iEvents calendar is a one-stop shop of things that are happening at UC San Diego that are specifically relevant for our international community. So by going to just ievents.ucsd.edu, you can kind of get a taste for what's going on and things that you might be excited to participate in once you're here. iPrograms features our specific programs that we run throughout the year. So you might hear this term throughout your stay here. An event is usually kind of like a one-off occasion, and a program has a little bit more of like a long-standing or reoccurring nature. So for example, you can sign up for our English in Action program. It's a conversation program to practice English weekly throughout the academic year. Similarly, our Global Coffee Hour is monthly throughout the academic year, where we invite our international community to just visit our office, grab some coffee, grab a pastry, and get to meet one another. If you're interested in any one of these programs, you can head to iprograms.ucsd.edu to learn more. But one of the programs I specifically want to feature is our Grad Pals Peer Mentorship Program. So Grad Pals essentially helps our international community start to build connections before you even arrive. So you can sign up for Grad Pals starting now. Most commonly, you will get matched with someone within your same department. But as mentees are filling out their application, you can kind of put different preferences of folks that you might want to be matched with as your Grad Pal mentor. Ultimately, this program really aims to help new students settle in by giving them opportunities to ask about life in San Diego, life at UC San Diego, provide them with support specifically during those first few weeks, because we know that such a time of transition and use the overall transition into graduate life at UC San Diego. And then please follow us on social media. So we are very active. We are on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, as well as YouTube. And so you can connect with us in those different spaces and be able to stay in touch with what's happening at our office. Okay, so some additional resources as we wrap up our scheduled content for this webinar. So just a few important reminders. Once you have accepted your offer of admission and set up your account, similar to what Jessica was saying earlier, if you are interested in applying for on-campus housing, you can go ahead and do so. So hdh.ucsd.edu, we will have actually a webinar focused specifically on graduate student housing. But for folks who are really interested in living on campus specifically, that's something that you can do essentially as soon as you accept your offer of admission and set up your account. As Jessica mentioned again, Monday, March 18th is when you can begin requesting your visa documents via the iPortal. In mid-May is when those on-campus housing contracts are due. So just want to make sure you're aware of that. In July will be the deadline to submit health immunization requirements and complete the OPHD training. Again, we will have actually a pre-raffle webinar dedicated to student health insurance and immunization requirements coming up on March 26th. So we'll go into more detail there, but I want to put that date on your radar. And then in September is when lots of exciting things happen. It's when tuition is due, there'll be move-in, check-in, as well as new international student orientation. And so you can learn more by visiting iorientation.ucsd.edu. Here is a list of some of our upcoming pre-arrival webinars. So on Tuesday, March 19th, we'll talk about applying for your US visa. Then we'll follow with graduate student housing, followed by student health, focusing on insurance and immunization requirements, graduate student funding, teaching assistantships, and TOEFL, so English language requirements. TOEFL is typically the English exam for those English language requirements. Student life and getting involved on campus, finances and student accounts, as well as CVIS transfer that Jessica mentioned earlier, and then on May 9th, campus safety. So like I mentioned earlier before, you can both register for upcoming webinars at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu, as well as once it's been a week post-webinar, we'll have a section on our website of previous webinars, and you can go back and actually access those recordings, and you can refer back to that information. I do want to note that this webinar is at 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time on a Wednesday. In the future, you will notice that moving forward, many of our webinars will be on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So just want to make a note of that for your records so that you can kind of plan accordingly. Okay, so we have a few questions already in the question and answer, which is very exciting to see. So we'll go ahead and open that now. But like I said, if for some reason we aren't able to connect with you, you can always reach out to us via icontact@ucsd.edu, excuse me. And then iNewStudent, again, is just a great overview for kind of what you can expect from this process. But we will start. We have a question here, and this most likely, Shauna, might go to your, sorry, if we say GEPA, we're referring to the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs. So you'll find at UC San Diego, we use lots of acronyms. It can be a little bit overwhelming. So let's start with two. ISEO is usually standing for the International Services and Engagement Office, and GEPA is usually standing for Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs. So this might be a little bit more of a GEPA question, but is the WES course evaluation required to get the form I-20?
Yeah, so I do feel like this sort of bridges our two offices. And I'm also going to be looking to Mary, but my understanding is that we would want to receive the evaluation as soon as we can, but if it comes to be that you come to UC San Diego and you bring all of your documentation, then we would accept it at the beginning of fall, but I'll let Mary say anything else she wants to say there.
Yeah, thanks, Shauna. It's a great question. It is not, so you do not need to complete the West course by course ICAP eval in order to get your I-20 form. So we understand that, some folks are still in a program, like earning a degree, and so they don't yet have their complete academic materials in order to complete the West course by course eval. Sometimes it takes some time to get those materials submitted to WES. So yeah, short answer is not required in order to proceed. Like, do not wait on your WES course by course eval in order to start the I-20 process. And this information is in your portal. So again, look at your portal, read it carefully. You'll see that under the WES course by course information, we share a deadline of the 4th Friday of fall quarter. So that is the deadline for your WES course by course eval. So we give students a pretty generous window of time in order to get that evaluation into our office. So always reach out with any questions that you have if you experience any issues, but do not wait if you're currently enrolled in a program or suspect that it may take time for your previous institution to get those materials organized and submitted to us. Don't wait for that process in order to do your I-20.
And while we're on the subject, we actually have a couple questions about the WES course by course evaluation. So I think we can maybe tackle a few of those. So our next question is, are only the transcripts required for the WES course by course ICAP evaluation, not the actual degree?
It's a great question. So one of the great things about WES is when you go in and you create your account for WES, it's going to ask you for your detailed academic history. So it's going to ask you for the institution that you've attended or are currently attending, where it's located. It's going to essentially identify exactly the schools that it is going to be collecting documentation from. When you submit that information in WES, it is then going to provide you with a detailed list of exactly what you have to submit to WES in order for your evaluation to be complete. And that does vary based on your institution. Different countries have different academic requirements and certificates or transcripts. So, an individual who is submitting a WES course by course eval that includes a degree from India could look very different than Singapore. And so there's not really one exact answer there. So you have to start the process in WES, and it will very clearly outline exactly what you have to submit. Generally, for students who are submitting official documentation from institutions outside of the United States, this includes the equivalent or the exact of an official transcript and diploma certificate of some kind. But again, it really varies country by country and institution by institution. So I would encourage you to start the process so you can get an idea of what's required of you, so you can start to gather that information, or at least connect with your institution to start the process of gathering that information.
Lovely. And for a student who's already finished their WES course by course eval, is there a way that they can make sure the document has successfully arrived to GEPA or the graduate admission office?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we understand that some students have already completed a WES course by course eval in the past, and as long as it is complete, so as long as it's a complete and accurate snapshot of your academic history, you can absolutely use that previous WES eval. Or if you're just really on top of it and you've already completed your WES eval, I will say WES has a very quick turnaround time. So once you have submitted all the required documentation to WES, generally the turnaround time within WES to have the evaluation completed is about 7 business days, which is pretty quick. And within WES, you can then select UC San Diego to have it sent to our office, and we include detailed instructions in your portal to make sure that you're selecting the correct destination. So it's UC San Diego graduate admissions. And in your portal, there is a checklist. And so WES course by course eval is your checklist item, essentially. When it has been received and processed by our office, you'll see a green check mark. And the text in your portal will update to say, like, we've received, all of the academic information that we need at this time. And then you will receive another letter. So you received your admission letter that notes that you've been provisionally admitted. Once all of your pending admissions to do items have been, which generally means once you've submitted all required official documentation or academic official documentation, you will receive another letter in your portal. So you'll get another email saying there's been an update in your status portal, and it will notify you that your admission has been finalized. So that is how you will know. I do want to note, for anyone who, is able to be working on this process already or has already done so, because the graduate admissions office is still in the process of our peak admissions period for admitting students still for fall 2024, we do not begin checking off and reviewing final items until June. So if you are like sitting there and being like, why hasn't it been checked off? Please don't panic. You're welcome to check in with our office, but it says it in your portal too, that we don't begin reviewing those final official documents until June, just because we're still in the middle of our peak admissions period. So sit tight, and if you have any concerns in the meantime, definitely reach out to us, but otherwise, if you've completed the WES process and your evaluation is complete and you've sent it to UCSD, everything should be okay.
Wonderful. Okay, and hopefully this will be the last question for now. But in the event that there are some delays, so let's say a university takes a long time to complete sending the transcripts to WES, but they do have proof of their completing their undergrad. Can you reiterate what is the latest date for UC San Diego to receive the evaluation?
Yeah, our latest date is, and we say it's the Friday of the 4th week of your first quarter. And so usually this falls like very early October. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. That was a mistake. Late October. Our quarters start quite late at UC San Diego. So generally this is in like the latter half of October. And again, this is information in your portal. You are going to be receiving emails from our office. So you're not going to be expected to just like remember this and keep track of it on your own. While I definitely encourage you to write yourself a note, in a planner or in your phone, you are going to be getting reminder emails from the graduate admissions office. So essentially throughout the summer, as our team starts to review completed WES evaluations, folks who have not submitted their completed evaluations will start getting reminders in like July, August, September, October. That being said, if you are unable to submit your documentation by the fourth Friday of your fall quarter, you will receive a hold on your account. You will receive information about this in the reminder emails. That hold will prevent enrollment for your winter quarter. I know that sounds scary, but there are also alternative ways. If you are still in the process and you are in touch with your department and with our office and have communicated that you are, still working on getting those documents completed with WES, there are avenues, that allow us to temporarily lift that hold so you can, enroll in the courses that you need while you work to complete your WES course by course eval. So we really work with students. We're not trying to, make it difficult or stressful for you, but it's also important that we have all of your official academic information in order to finalize your admission.
Wonderful. Okay, so moving on, this question will most likely be for Jessica and a little bit the ISEO side of the house. So this student saw that the start date of the academic year is September 23rd. When do students need to reach the US by?
Great question. So both students in the F and J visa category enter the US no earlier than 30 days prior to the program start date listed on the student's Form I-20 or DS 2019. So when you receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019, I encourage you to take some time to read through all the information. For one, make sure the information, the personal information reported on it is correct. You will see information that matches what is on your passport and what you provided to us in your iPortal request. You'll see that there is a program start date. That is the date that you are required to report to UC San Diego for the beginning of your official program of study activities. So that could be the start of the quarter. It could be the start of your required orientation activities, might be the start of classes. It depends. That start date is going to be dependent on what your graduate program reported to us. You are supposed to be here by this date. That program start date on your Form I-20 or DS 2019 is what dictates or defines the 30-day window during which you are able to enter the United States. This is called your 30-day grace period. So take a look at that program start date, pull up a date calculator or do the math in your head if you can, and count 30 days out from that program start date. That is the earliest that you would be able to seek entry to the United States.
And Jessica, just for good measure, is there a latest date that students can enter by?
Good question, Grace. So Obviously, ideally, you want to arrive by the program start date listed on your document, because that is the date that you are expected to show up in class or at orientation for whatever activities your program or department is starting, right? If for whatever reason you cannot arrive to UC San Diego by your program start date, a couple things you want to keep in mind. You want to notify your academic department, so definitely reach out to them. They are going to need to advise you on what is the latest that you would be able to join. Some graduate programs will not let students join late because they start so fast and there's so much information right out the gate that if you miss even a couple days, you're not going to be able to catch up. Other graduate programs might have some more flexibility in allowing a late arrival. So it is going to be on your academic department. It is their decision whether or not they allow you to join program activities late. Also, in addition to notifying them, notify our office. Stop by our online advising is probably going to be the easiest, and speak to an advisor, because we can also either help you get in touch with your academic department if you're not sure who the point of contact would be, and also just advise you from an immigration perspective what you might need to be prepared for if you will be coming through customs after the date shown on your I-20 or DS 2019, which is what they will typically look at. So late arrival is in many cases possible, but it's going to be determined by your academics department. And you'll want to make sure you talk to them and us just to help you kind of navigate what that looks like.
Wonderful. And I'll just speak to the second part of that question, which is when would students find out about on-campus housing? So I will say we are having actually Housing, Dining, and Hospitality join us next week on Thursday, March 21st. For a graduate student housing webinar. So I would highly encourage you to attend that webinar. We'll talk a little bit about on-campus housing. We'll talk about the process for applying for off-campus housing, some housing resources. But our colleagues in HDH are the best folks to speak to that, and you will get them live next week. So please do join us then.
Can I jump onto this topic, Grace? Maybe we could go to the previous slide, which has all the dates of the upcoming webinars. And the reason I mentioned this is because there was another person asking about TOEFL scores and IELTS scores for TA positions. And so we will actually be diving more into that topic on the April 2nd webinar. We're going to really talk about TA positions and the English language requirements in more depth. So great question. We're going to ask that you just sort of hold off on that for a bit, and there'll be lots of good info coming your way in a couple of weeks on that topic. Thanks for letting me jump in.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. That's so helpful. We do have a few questions regarding funding. So first, I'm just going to pop in the chat the link for our funding requirements. Hopefully that's a great website that lists a lot of really good information. But I'll also pass a little bit more of these specific questions over to Jessica. So for one of the questions, it's about financial support for dependents. So for an F2 dependent, the student is curious about securing essentially for 9 months, 7,200, or like, what is the definition of 1 year? So is that 7,200 and 2,400 for the 1 year? So is that a year considered 9 months or considered 12 months?
This is a great question. So the funding requirement for the F1 visa category is that you must prove you have cash funding, liquid assets set aside to cover the first academic year of your program of study. The academic year may be 9 months, maybe 11 months, maybe 12 months, depending on your graduate program, because some graduate programs require enrollment in the summer and others do not. When Grace, if you're able, would you actually mind sharing our funding requirements website or screen sharing if we can? I would like to point out a couple of things for some of these questions. So Grace dropped this link in the chat. This is the funding requirements page on our website, and I want to point out a couple of things. This first section, you will see there's a drop down for newly admitted students. Definitely review this information. It is going to point out that for F1 students, you must show the amount of funding for your first academic year. For J1 students, if you are being sponsored by your home country government or the US government or your home employer maybe, you are going to be eligible for the J1 visa. You will need to show funding for your entire program of study. Read through this information. This is relevant to you. If you take a look at the next section, which is acceptable sources of funding, two things I want to call out really quickly. All documentation that you submit to ISEO, to the US consulate, everything you submit for the visa process has to be in English, has to be dated within the last 3 months if it's a financial document. So keep that in mind. Sometimes students find that their banks may not be able to provide bank statements in English. You might need to ask them for a letter or might need to get the documentation from them and then have it officially translated by a certified translation service. I saw some questions about what type of documentation can be accepted. Thank you, Grace. We have a list right here. It will tell you what can be taken, what cannot be taken, and specifically the criteria that document needs to meet. So make sure to review this list. I saw some questions about, if I have a sponsor, if my parent or my relative is sponsoring me. And I think I specifically saw a question about, do I need to prove that relationship? So to receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office, you do not have to prove the relationship if you have someone who will be providing funding for you. So if your parents will be helping to finance your program, or maybe you have an aunt or uncle, you don't need to prove to us what that relationship is. However, when you go for your F1 or J1 visa interview at the consulate, they may ask you to provide evidence of that relationship. In other words, they're going to want to know, why would this person finance your studies in the United States? And it becomes particularly important the farther away that relationship is from you. So parents, that might seem obvious, but an aunt or uncle, maybe not. A friend, definitely not. So while you may not need to gather that kind of proof of relationship information for your I-20 or DS 2019 request, it's a good idea to start thinking about it now as you prepare your financial documentation, because you will need to have it prepared later. Scrolling down the next section on this page, amount required, this is where you can find the estimates. This is what you'll need to prove for funding. So you will find your program, and Grace, if you can actually expand that, I want to point out graduate programs includes some master's programs, all PhD programs, the Rady School of Management, the School of Global Policy and Strategy, and also many of our Master of Advanced Science degree programs have slightly different academic year formats, which changes the amount of estimated funding you are required to show for your visa process. So make sure you actually locate your specific program in this table. If you are in Rady or GPS, make sure you look under that drop down, not just the generic graduate drop down. If you're in a Master of Advanced Science degree, make sure you look under that drop down. Otherwise, you can rely on the graduate figures. And then for the question about funding for dependents, Grace, if you wouldn't mind expanding that spouse or child block. Most graduate programs function on an academic year that is 9 months long, but as I mentioned, some don't. Some require an academic year some have an academic year that requires summer enrollment. So the figures here are based off of the 9-month academic calendar, because that is what most graduate students rely on. However, if you are in a degree program that requires summer enrollment, and therefore your academic year is actually 12 months, you would add the first column, 7,200, plus the 1 quarter column to actually result in 4 quarters, right? Fall, winter, spring, summer. Dependents, I don't know if we had this question, but I just want to point out both the F1 and the J1 visa category, or the F and J visa categories, do allow you to bring dependents if they are your legal spouse or child under 21 years old. And so you will be required to, if you want to bring, or if you have those dependents, you will be required to provide proof of legal spouse or birth certificate for a child as part of your iPortal request. think I hit hopefully several questions in that answer. But are there, let me take a look, any other funding related questions we didn't touch on here?
That was lovely, Jessica. I do want to note that we are approaching the last few minutes of our webinar. So to our presenters, feel free to take a look through the Q&A. And if there are specific questions that you'd like to address or highlight, we'll use those last few minutes to do so. For our students who are joining our webinar, we are going to do our best, but we will stop at 9. I will say that if we don't get your question answered, please do reach out to our office via icontact.ucsd.edu. And we will have lots of future pre-arrival webinars. So that's also a way that you can connect with us. Similar to this format, our beginning portion will have kind of a scripted information that we want to share with you, but we dedicate open question and answer at the end of each one of our webinars because we want these sessions to be useful for you. So please know that that time is dedicated for that space. All right, handing it over to our presenters. Are there any questions that are coming through that you'd like to speak to before we close for today?
I'll jump in. Hopefully to answer a few more of these in one go. Grace, could you navigate to our iNews student website, please? So if you go to inewsstudent.ucsd.edu, click on Graduate Students, and look under Step 1. This website is designed to walk you through the visa process. So you'll see at the top there, we have the setup instructions, including how to set up your PID, your UCSD email. There's a reminder there about accepting your offer of admission, completing the statement of legal residence, finishing your pending admission document requirements, just like Mary talked through with the West. If you scroll down, you're going to find here deadlines to submit your request in iPortal. I saw a question about what are the specific documents I'll need to upload. You can find that in the next tab right there, required funding and supporting documents. There was a question about how do I know if I'm going to be under the F1 or J1 visa. Our iPortal request, the request you will submit in iPortal is actually built to figure that out with you. So when you are answering those questions, it's going to tell you which one you are eligible for. However, you can also look at our F1 or J1 visa classification website in advance to get a sense of which category you will be eligible for. Funding requirements we talked about, you'll need to upload financial documentation. You'll need to have a color copy of your passport profile page ready, your UC San Diego admission letter. There may be other documentation that is going to be not general to most applicants, but specific to some certain scenarios. If you're transferring your CBIS record, if you're bringing dependents, if you have if you're going to be a sponsored student, your funding's coming from an outside organization. Whatever of those extra documents might be, iPortal will direct you to upload those when you fill out the request. The next section is going to be the direct instructions on how to submit that request in iPortal. I think I saw a question about if my program is a special start program. Oh, sorry, Grace. Request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 in iPortal. How to fill out this request in iPortal. If you have been admitted to a special start program, a summer start program, an early start program, this is all terminology you might hear depending on your academic department for a program that starts in the summer. So you would fill out the new admit I-20 or DS 2019 summer start program request. And then I won't go down the rest of this website in detail, but if you can just scroll slowly, Grace, once you've gotten your I-20 information here on how to apply for your FNJ visa stamp, which we'll also be going over in our pre-arrival webinar next Tuesday. And then we have a lot of frequently asked questions. I encourage you to check there if you have questions come up as you move through these steps.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that the session was useful for you. We tried our best to answer as many questions as we could, and we look forward to joining you next week and the following weeks to talk about different pieces of your new student journey here at UC San Diego. Welcome and have a great rest of your day.